an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Vor Game's saga, book something. I'm going to stop saying the number. The Vor Game, chapters 7, 8, and 9. In these chapters, Miles is sent out on an assignment and is immediately spotted by one of his old subordinates. Things go left. Somebody gets murdered. It's getting pinned on Miles. Oh, and also Gregor snuck out and everybody thinks he's been kidnapped, probably. Gregor, what are you doing, baby? Sweetie, what are you doing? Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Jeff for commissioning this episode. You guys, this is such a weird series of events. You know, in terms of what it's probably like to be a royal, I'm going to go ahead and say, I understand the urge that overtook Gregor, probably. Like, I am somebody who can be kind of intolerant of the whole, like, oh, I'm royalty and I have it so hard, you know, because, like, you may, certainly, especially, like, depending on the era that we're talking about, but oftentimes that sort of thing, I just feel sort of like, wah, 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 you know, like, I just don't want to listen to it. And I can't help but feel like this with Gregor has been handled in such a great way where it's like, even he doesn't really complain that much about his own position. At one point, Miles says something about how he thinks his father probably had more in mind for he himself, Miles, than being a mascot. And Gregor responds, I was surprised, with, well, being a mascot isn't such bad work if you can get it. And I was expecting him to, like, be a lot more like, yeah, it fucking sucks. There is a point where he says, probably they could have just used a life-size cutout of me instead of having me go to these meetings and nobody would care. So, you know, it's not like he has no complaints whatsoever. But I just really did like the fact that he admits the job isn't too bad. There's not a whole lot for me to complain about. I'm not going to pretend that this is such an onerous position. And he can simultaneously admit that and also be like, but I just don't want to do this anymore, you know, like, or not even anymore, but I just want to break from it. It's just been kind of relentless is the word I'm thinking of. I'm getting way ahead of myself here, but I just kind of wanted to, like, address that out of the gate because, you know, like I said, the whole, like, very privileged person feeling so sorry for themselves thing, it often does not hit for me. And I felt like she really struck a nice note here of it being something that was extremely fairly talked about, but he doesn't lean too much into the self-pity. So, all right, let's begin at the beginning. And chapter 7, Miles gets put into these quarters alone. And I love this line so much. Nobody is, like, paying attention to him the way that he is used to. And it says, was it possible life in limbo was having a chameleon effect, rendering him translucent? Oh, I love it. How long will I be staying here? Miles asked the officer. I don't know, Ensign, the man replied, and left him. His duffel, jammed with his clothes in a hastily packed box, sat in the middle of the apartment's floor. all his worldly goods from Kyril Island, smelling moldy, a cold breath of Arctic damp. Miles poked through them. Everything seemed to be there, including his weather library, and prowled his new quarters. It was a one-room efficiency, shabbily furnished in the style of 20 years back, with a few comfortable chairs, a bed, a simple kitchenette, empty cupboards and shelves and closets. No abandoned garments or objects or leftovers to hint at the identity of any previous occupant. There had to be bugs. Any shiny surface could conceal a vid pickup, and the ears were probably not even within the room. But were they switched on? Or, almost more of an insult, maybe Alien wasn't even bothering to run them. So, Miles is kept away from everybody. He, gets out of his room and just wanders around, and somebody finds him and is just like, dude, you can't do this. And brings him back to his room, gives him some credits for the cafeteria, and it's just like, you get to go eat, and that's what you get to do. And then you go back to your room. That's what your schedule is now like. And when Miles is like, how many credits did he give me? Maybe this will give me a hint how long I'm going to be here. He was given 100 credits, and he's just like, oh boy. So this dude is starting to go quite stir crazy. He is contemplating his situation when Gregor arrives. And he flung himself into the larger chair, the one Miles had just vacated, leaned back, hooked a leg over one armchair, and sighed wearily, as if all the air were being let out of him. Here, elegant anesthesia. Miles took it and peered in. 2 bottles of wine, by God, already chilled. Bless you, my son. And he's like, how did you get in here? And Gregor's like, I mean, they can't really keep me out. I've started to get better at being pushy about stuff. Besides, your mother's religion grants some kind of good karma for visiting the sick and prisoners, and I hear you've been the 2-in-1. Ah, so Mother had put Gregor up to this. He should have guessed by the Vorkosigan private label on the wine. Heavens, she'd sent the good stuff. He stopped swinging the bottle by its neck and carried it with greater respect. Miles was lonely enough by now to be more grateful for than embarrassed by this maternal intervention. I was glad to hear that, because I did have a moment of just like, is he going to feel a way about his mom intervening? And I just really hoped not, because this is sort of thing that some people get really touchy about that kind of thing. And especially in the military, I could see feeling like, come on, don't make it seem like mommy had to help. But honestly, in this situation, you're already screwed and you're already being punished and people already have an idea about what's going on with you. I just don't see the harm. I think this is perfectly fine. And the the conversation that goes on here. So there's a mention about the age difference between him and Gregor, and how Gregor, I believe, is 7 years older than Miles, somewhere around there. I'm trying to remember how old he was when, the second book. I feel like he was maybe 6 or 7, but he is just enough older than Miles that they didn't really have the kind of brotherly bond that they may otherwise have had. They like each other, they got along well, and they were made to play together a lot. But it was just the kinds of bonds that come from going through the same stages of life and development at the same time just didn't happen. And there's a mention about how probably a lot of the games that he participated in were a little bit too young for his taste at the time, because he was made to play with Miles and Elena, who are of an age, so majority rules. And they were the only people, the only kids that it was safe to let the Emperor play with. And so that's the sum total of the playmates that he had growing up outside of going to the academy later. And when you step back and look at things in that sense, it really is kind of heartbreaking how isolated this kid has had to be, and how, as you go out into the world and see more of it, you begin to really start to comprehend what you've been missing. And also, like, even his academy work, he gets assigned to things, and he says something to Miles later about how, like, they had to pretend that I was in charge and pretend that I wasn't making all of their jobs harder just by being there. And that's the part that I think would bother me the most. I'm somebody who often has a hard time with this sense of, like, I am creating more work. I am demanding labor of you. You know, like, I always am somebody who wants to make myself accommodating and take up less space. And it's not a great instinct always, but I can't deny that it's there. And if I just, like, the reality of who I was caused people to have extra work and be more stressed, I think that would really begin to bum me out. And I'm sure growing up with it, you get used to it to a degree. You know, I'm sure very likely it's not as bad for him as it would be for somebody like me. But nevertheless, it's clearly gotten old for him. I just find his whole, like, situation pretty fascinating. Um, so, uh, let's see. Oh yeah, Miles, because that's when he says, Miles points out, you had a year on active space duty. And yeah, pretending I was an officer, pretending I was doing a job instead of making everybody else's job harder just by being there. You at least were permitted real risk. And Miles is like, yeah, that wasn't part of the plan. And Gregor is like, I think that's, like, the trick of it. They survived real situations. And Miles is like, my father's career started when his mom was murdered in front of him. So I don't really think that's something that I would want. Thank you, but no. And there's a mention also of the fact that Miles knows what Prince Serg was really like, and he isn't sure, but it seems that he doesn't believe that Gregor has been told about this. He's not positive. There's a possibility maybe Gregor does know. But if he does, it's not mentioned. He doesn't, like, share that. And that was something that kind of surprised me, because so much has been kept from Miles and Elena about their parents and the things that happened, you know, all of their history has been sort of clouded, some of the worst parts of it. And so I really fully expected that everything would have been lied about. But evidently they told him that. And I am genuinely sort of puzzled by it. Like, why bother telling him the truth about this and not about other things? What purpose does it serve? And he doesn't know the one thing that, like, I kind of assumed, okay, so he can't know this then, because if he knew that, there would be all kinds of other information that followed. So he knows what Serg was really like, but he doesn't know that Serg was killed on purpose by the Emperor, who had decided that his son was not fit to be Emperor. Y'all, I don't know if you're going to tell him how terrible Serg was. I kind of feel like you may as well tell him the other thing. And maybe that's just me, you know, like, I don't know. But I genuinely had a moment of, like, well, just give him all of it then. May as well. But probably there's the sense of, like, you could accidentally spill this to your friend, and what would he do if he knew that? You know, he could take it out on Errol because he followed orders. That could go badly. But I just, a lot of me just really wants them to be frank with Miles. And I think there's also a weird thing where if you've got a child and you've kept certain things from them, they may reach an age where you start to think that they could handle it. But then you have to, like, tell them in a way that you're kind of admitting I've lied to you this whole time. You know what I'm saying? So like that is the part that I feel might be the most difficult to get past is that yeah, I'm going to share with you some new information, and by sharing this with you, I am letting you know that I've been deceiving you for like a couple decades actually. Which I mean, I understand not wanting to do that, but I also feel like that's just part of parenting, probably. I don't know what parenting is like. I say this as like an outsider who is waving their hand with just very easy proclamations about what parenting is with no real firsthand knowledge. Um, so this, the scene between the two of them, it's sort of interesting to me because they get along clearly, but there is a sort of sense of like, well, there's not easiness exactly. And Miles sort of wishes that he had put some music on at some point because the conversation between the two of them flags a bit. And whenever it does, the silence is just really awkward and heavy. And this is something that I am a big proponent of. If you are having people over, excuse me, especially if you're having friends that you maybe haven't seen in a while and you aren't sure how the vibe is going to be, or if you're having family over and tension is sort of high with family in like usually putting a little bit of background music on can really help keep things from feeling oppressive. Um so let's see, Emhan is in the chat says Gregor sounds too self-aware to enjoy the privilege of his position. If he was a dumbass, he could just bask in how much of a genius he was instead of knowing he was being patronized. Yeah, like imagine if somebody like Ivan were in Gregor's position. Very different vibe. Um, so let's see. Uh oh yeah, here it is. So he mentions how everybody's pressuring him about getting married, and Miles is like, they kind of have a point. If anything happened to you, there would be a lot of people out there vying for either your position or to just keep somebody else from getting your position. And Gregor's like, yeah, you know, you're part of that group. And Miles is like, look at me. They're not going to pick me. They'd have to be really pissed at somebody else in line for anybody to tap me to take your spot. And if that happened, I really would just fucking bail. Just get out of there. Um, do me a favor, get married, settle down, and have 6 little Vorbaras real quick. Now there's an idea, running away from home. I wonder how far I'd get before Ilian caught up with me. Better hope Ilian caught up with you before anybody else did. I don't know, wasn't there an emperor of China who ended up pushing a broom somewhere? And 1,000 lesser emigres, countesses running restaurants? Escape is possible. This is interesting to me. I don't know about these stories. So if you guys have details on this, I am really, really curious about it. Um, so then they play this game. Miles beats him way too quick initially. It's not a game that he even likes, but there's nothing else to do. Eventually, he sort of like draws it out and it gets Gregor a little bit interested. And Gregor says to him, I don't get why they sent you to Kirill Island. Like, you ran a fucking fleet. You know, like, what were you doing at Kirill Island? And Miles is like, officially, no, I didn't. And the thing with the mercenaries, I didn't exactly like command the fleet. I just like tricked everybody and then got out of there. Doesn't quite count. And they discuss how nothing's really been done with the mercenaries that they know of. So they're just sort of wondering what's going on with them. And Miles, he's like, I've often wondered, knowing what I know now, I could have. Miles stopped, shook his head. Or maybe it's like heights. Better not look down. You freeze and then you fall. And oof, if that isn't a word, that's just life, man. Like you need to be aware to a point, but there is a sort of paralysis that can come from overthinking things. And that's what I tend to cope with the most is that kind of paralysis. Oof, it's not fun. And the second guessing of things is also something that his father mentioned earlier, that like I don't try and do that to my officers. I just try and accept that they were in the situation and they knew what was likely the better course of action. And even if they didn't, at this point, oh well, like what are you going to do now about the fact that they made the wrong choice? I Sometimes you just got to keep your mouth shut. Um so Miles says, so would it be like against the rules for me to ask you for a favor and get me the fuck out of here? I know that that's kind of tacky. I don't even like to put it out there, but I am losing my fucking mind. I don't have anything to do. I'm gonna like explode in here. They don't need to let me leave the building. Just give me something to do. I could do paperwork, whatever. Um, and I love that he stops himself. He'd said too much. Damn the wine. Damn the wine. And I love it's wine, WINE, and then wine, WHINE, which I just saw this now. I didn't see, like, I was listening to the audiobook. So both words sound identical. And I didn't realize that that was the play on words that she did until just a second. And that's delightful. Ugh, if that isn't true, man, though, like, it's so difficult, you guys. I love whining. Like, it's so much fun. There are people out there that I don't like to complain. Fuck you. I love to complain. Complaining is such a vent. It's such a way to bond with other people as well, because we all have our same shit that we deal with a lot of the time, even when we have very different lives. There will be like a particular thing that all of us have had to cope with. Also, it's funny. Like, if you manage to reframe a complaint in a certain way and turn it into a joke, or step back and look at the ridiculousness of a situation, it can sort of recontextualize things sometimes, you know? Like, y'all know I'm aware of oh, sorry, there's a bunch of people in the chat all of a sudden. Sorry guys, I didn't even see you. Um Mary Stockler says the last empire of China ended up a janitor after the communist takeover. Ooh. SM Hurtmore says a lot of the aristocracy of the Russian Empire wound up in Istanbul doing regular jobs after the revolution. Oh. And M. Han says everybody loves whining, but we can feel embarrassed about it afterward. That's fair. I think yeah, that's definitely fair. Like if you get caught up in it and don't even quite realize you're doing it at the time. Um, but what I was going to say was just like, you guys all know about the tech issues that I've been having. I'm just going to list off the things that broke that had to be replaced or brought into a repair shop and fixed. My desktop computer died and barely like carried me into getting a new one. My Switch got peed on by my cat and had to be brought in to be repaired. The same day that I had my computer out for repairs, my AirPods died. And those, not only did I send them in for repair and get them back, but they still didn't work. So I had to send them back in again. Then my television died about 4 days ago. The day before yesterday, my laptop turned off twice in the middle of working on it. So that thing is clearly about to go. And then yesterday, the charger for my Apple Watch and my AirPods died as well. And I had to replace that. I don't know what the fuck is going on, but something has happened and it's like I'm being haunted. And I'm just going to complain about that all the time because it's bonkers. And you just turn it into like a wild story because it doesn't make any sense. Why would this all happen at once? I don't know. I don't have an explanation. Is it whining? Yes. Like I'm not even going to pretend, But also, you share it in a certain way with a certain tone and people can hear that you're not just like trying to get sympathy. You're just trying to be like, can you believe this shit? And I think that's the key. But anyway, M. Han says at this point, I think you've been cursed. Somebody has mentioned that. I probably should like get some incense and smudge this house a little bit and clean things out, maybe just to see if anything. But my mom blames Mercury retrograde. So let's see. Miles didn't know if it was the Emperor, the bugs, or the wheels already in motion grinding slowly. But 2 days afterward, he found himself assigned to the job of administrative assistant to the guard commander for the building. It was console work, scheduling, payroll, updating computer files. The job was interesting for a week while he was learning it, mind-numbing after that. By the end of a month, the boredom and banality were beginning to prey on his nerves. Was he loyal or merely stupid? And, y'all, if this isn't the realest shit, I will be so excited about a job when I first start because it'll be something that I'm like, yeah, I'm totally capable of this. And then once I really get it, the way I loathe it. I had this happen when I started working at Target way back in the day when I first moved to Philly with Brendan. And they put me on cashier for a day. And I had been a barista, which is a very like fast paced, always having to keep recipes in your head. And so going to a cashier, it was at first such a relief, just swiping stuff and not having to really do much thinking, not having to run around, get supplies, blah, blah, blah. And then I began to realize like, oh no, running around and getting supplies, remembering things, all of that helps break the day up. Otherwise, you're just standing in one place doing this swipe over and over for 8 fucking hours. And it's horrible. Cashiers, you have my sympathy. One of the most boring jobs. So the whole thing, he's just starting to be like, what if I killed myself? What would they do? What would they say? And once you start getting into that headspace, it's like, ooh, danger, danger. Another month slipped by. As a spiritual exercise, he decided to fill his off-duty hours by watching every training vid in the military library into strict alphabetical order. The assortment was truly astonishing. He was particularly bemused by the 30-minute vid under H, hygiene, explaining how to take a shower. Well, yes, there probably were backcountry recruits who really needed the instruction. After some weeks, he had worked his way down to L, laser rifle model D67, power pack circuitry, maintenance, and repair, when he was interrupted by a call ordering him to report to Ilian's office. I just want to say that learning how to do the drains on, what is the name of the place, the island that he was, and then going through all of this man is about to have so much basic knowledge that I think is going to come in super handy. And also, y'all know that I had my suspicions about his commander on the island dealing in illegal weapons, and probably he's going to be running up against that out in this, like, on this mission as well, I think. So Emhan says, I think it's ridiculous most grocery stores don't let their cashiers sit down. Aldi's at least gives their people chairs. Yeah, it's really gross. It really is. Like, if you just sit back and look at how ableist that is, it's just for appearances that we should be like, for what reason, you know? Anyway, he goes to see Ilian, he gets called in, and there's a dude who he is introduced to, maybe 35 years old. He had something of Ilian's unmemorable bland look about the face, but was more heavily built, pale. He might easily pass for some minor bureaucrat, a sedentary indoorsman. But that particular look could also be acquired by spending a great deal of time cooped up on spaceships. Ensign Vorkosigan, this is Captain Ungari. Captain Ungari is one of my galactic operatives. He has 10 years' experience gathering information for this department. His specialty is military evaluation. And Ilian basically puts Miles through a little bit of a test for Ungari's benefit and asks him, first, what have you heard about the mercenaries? And we find out that they have changed their name back. And Ilian is a little bit concerned about what's going on out there because there seems to be some sort of arms race and he doesn't really understand what's happening here. And he shows Miles a model of Hagen Hub and says, give me a summation of what this hub signifies strategically. So Miles goes through the whole thing, and I'm not going to do it, but trust me that I am going to try and remember what he said here, because I have no doubt this is probably going to be significant. And he says, the last one, Planet and Republic of Pol, which connects to our own multi-nexus Komar. Also from Komar is our one straight jump to the Sedagandan sector. Miles glanced at Ilian for approval, hoping he was on the right track. Ilian glanced at Angari, who allowed his brows to rise fractionally. Meaning what? So, Ilian says the Hagen Hub is more than a potential choke point for the 4 adjoining systems. 25% of our own commercial traffic passes through it via Pol, and although Vervain is closed to Sedagandan military vessels just as Pol is closed to ours, the Seda's ship significant... Oh my god, this is so tricky to say. The Seda's ship significant civilian exchange through the same slot and out past Jackson's Hole. Anything like a war that blocks the hub would seem almost as damaging to Sedaganda as to us. And yet, after years of cooperative disinterest and neutrality, this area is alive with what I can only call an arms race. All 4 neighbors seem to be creating military interests. Pol has been beefing up the armament on all 6 jump point stations, even pulling forces from the side toward us, which I find a little startling, since Pol has been extremely wary of us ever since we took Komar. The Jackson's Hole Consortium is doing the same on its side. Vervain has hired a mercenary fleet called Randall's Rangers. All this is causing a low-grade panic on Aslan, whose interest in the Hagen Hub is, for obvious reasons, most critical. They're throwing half this year's military budget into a major jump point station, a floating fortress. And to cover the gap while they prepare, they have hired guns, who you may be familiar with. And Miles is just like, oh, okay, well, they did do, like, blockades, so I guess that makes sense. They are now going back to Oseran mercenaries, and he doesn't know why. The Sedagandan connection, or lack of it, bothers me. General chaos in the region would be as damaging to Sedaganda as to us, but if after the chaos passes, Sedaganda could somehow end up in control of the hub, they could block or control Barrayarn traffic as we do theirs through Komar. If you look at the other side of the Komar-Sedaganda jump as being under their control, that would put them across 2 of our 4 major galactic routes. Something labyrinthine, indirect, smells of Sedaganda's methods. Or would, if I could spot their sticky hands pulling any of the strings. They must be there, even if I can't see them yet. If the Jackson's Hole jump were cut, everyone would have to reroute through the Sedagandan Empire and profit there. So, what's the best way to capture a jump point from both ends at once? Miles recited automatically. Which is one reason Pol has been very careful never to let us amass any military presence in the Hagen Hub. But let us suppose someone on Pol stumbles across that nasty rumor I had so much trouble scotching, that the Dendari mercenaries are the private army of a certain Barrayaran Vor lordling. What will they think? They'll think we're getting ready to jump them. They might even go paranoid and seek a temporary alliance with Sedaganda. Very good, said Ilian. And then, even if perceived as an independent force, the Dendari are one more destabilizing influence in the region. The whole situation is disturbing, growing tenser by the day for no apparent reason. Only a little more force, one mistake, one lethal incident, could trigger turbulence, classic chaos, the real thing, unstoppable. Reasons, Miles. I want information. And it turns out he is being sent out with Ungari, and Ungari is going to perform the role of alleged bodyguard, but really is going to be the one that's like collecting information, while Miles, who at first Ungari thinks will be too conspicuous, Ilian makes the argument, well, maybe the more conspicuous he is, the less people will pay any attention to you, and you can just get on with it, and we don't have to worry as much because they will be very distracted by not only like just the way he looks and the position that he's going to occupy, but eventually if I have to drop him back into being Mr. Naismith, there is some potential here that he's going to be the exact blind that you need. Um, and he says, he's all yours. Use him as you see fit. Your mission is to gather info on the current crisis. Secondly, if possible, to use Ensign Vorkosigan to remove the Dendari mercenaries from the stage. If you decide to use a bogus contract to pull them out of the hub, you can draw on the covert ops account for a convincing down payment. You know the results I want. I'm sorry I can't make my orders more specific in advance of the intelligence you yourself must obtain. And Ilian tells Miles, enjoy your independence while it lasts. It ends with your first mistake. I'm trying to see if I'm not... Oh yeah, basically just do what you're fucking told is how it ends. And then chapter 8. He starts on his new name, Victor Rotha, procurement agent. Sounded like a pimp. Dubiously, Miles regarded his new persona twinned over the vid plate in his cabin. What was wrong with a simple Spartan mirror, anyway? His persona twinned over the vid plate. So basically, it's like using your phone in selfie mode instead of a mirror, I guess. I mean, it does seem a little excessive. Maybe it's supposed to be the danger of glass, like broken glass? I don't know. I think they have kind of unbreakable glass at this point, right? I would think. Sorry. Emhan says that's on Ilian, to be honest. Miles gift wrapped a mercenary force for him, and he kind of just ignored them. Miles obviously couldn't do anything with them with his oaths. Yeah, this was a point that I was going to bring up. So thank you for mentioning this, Emhan. Is you were given this fleet. I mean, that was, of course, we know that it was just sort of a like bullshit reasoning. Like, he didn't actually have a plan for them. This whole thing was an unintentional situation. But like, find something to do with them then. And I guess he just didn't think that they were going to, like, I wonder if Ilian had met the men that Miles had left in charge, maybe he would have changed the method he used to deal with these guys. Because otherwise, I am just left sort of wondering what the hell he was thinking. So I'm just going to assume that he underestimated their capabilities or their ambitions. There seems to be a sort of disdain for mercenaries, in Barrayarn culture because they are so honor bound and oath bound, and it's so much due to like history and bloodline, and so people who just like fight for money aren't taken very seriously. So I'm wondering if that is a part of it, of him just kind of being like, these guys are a joke. I don't know, but anyway. So yeah, Miles is being an arms dealer. That is his new persona for right now. And we get a little description about Pole 6, where they currently are. At one point, Pole 6 had been merely marked the jump point, no more than an emergency stop and communications transfer link. No one had yet solved the problem of getting messages through a wormhole jump, except by physically transporting them on a jump ship. In the most developed regions of the Nexus, comm ships jumped hourly, or even more often, to emit a tight beam burst that traveled at the speed of light to the next jump point in that region of local space, where messages were picked up and relayed out in turn, the fastest possible flow of information. In the less developed regions, one simply had to wait, sometimes for weeks or months, for a ship to happen by and hope they'd remember to drop off your mail. This is something that is so, like, what? This feels like something that It's Lois McMaster, not Louise, right? The author's name. Um, but I'll just call her Bujold. Bujold feels like somebody who just has a ton of scientific knowledge. And this feels based on, if not genuine facts, then at least a sort of theory that has some grounding in reality. There was just something about this that really it tasted real to me. You know what I'm saying? Um anyway, so now Pole 6 didn't just mark, it frankly guarded. Ungari had clicked his tongue in excitement, identifying and adding up Pole Navy ships clustered in the area around the new construction. They'd managed a spiral flight path into dock that revealed every side of the station and all ships both moored and moving. Your main job here, Ungari had told Miles, will be to give anyone watching us something more interesting to watch than me. Circulate. I doubt you'll need to expend any special effort to be conspicuous. Develop your cover identity. With luck, you may even pick up a contact or two who will be worthy of further study, though I doubt you'll run across anything of great value immediately. It doesn't work that way. So he he gets assigned Overholt to watch over him, who is the guy who arrested Miles. And Miles is just like, damn it, why did he have to put this guy in? It's so embarrassing. And I was just like, Miles, probably that's why. It'll keep you a little honest. Somebody that you can't schmooze, who has seen you at the lowest you've been, you know? And also, of course, the alien trusts the guy. So Miles has this appointment and he's just sort of wandering around at Liberty, and the brittle artificial environment emitted its own whiff of danger, a whiff that could balloon instantly into claustrophobic terror in the event of a sudden depressurization emergency. A concourse lined with shops, hostels, and eating facilities made a central meeting area. A curious trio idled just across the busy concourse from Miles. A big man dressed in loose clothing, ideal for concealing weapons, scanned the area uneasily. A professional counterpart of Sergeant Overkill's, no doubt. He and Overholt spotted each other and exchanged grim glances, carefully ignored each other after that. The bland man he guarded faded into near invisibility beside his woman. Did he now? That seems purposeful. She was short, but astonishingly intense. Slight figure, white blonde hair cropped close to her head, giving her an odd elfin look. Her black jumpsuit seemed shot with electric sparks, flowing over her skin like water, evening wear in the day cycle. Thin-heeled black shoes boosted her a few futile centimeters. Her lips were colored blood carmine to match the shimmering scarf that looped across alabaster collarbones to cascade from each shoulder, framing the bare white skin of her back. She looked expensive. And she, later on, does this whole routine with him. And it's difficult to know what the deal was, but I feel like, based on the fact that a body is discovered there later, she is trying to just get him in the room and distracted enough that he stays for a bit and makes a convincing either patsy for the murder, or he was intended to be taken hostage or killed and just got out of there in time. But I don't think it's that, based on how easy it was to get out of there. So I don't know, but we will get there. So he meets up with this guy, Liga, to do their little arms discussion. And when Miles asks who the woman was, Liga says, I don't know her, but the man they're following is your main competition here. So I like, allegedly that guy is the one that he's supposed to meet later and she has taken over, right? Is that the dude who winds up dead as well? The invisible one? In quotes. So Miles is discussing what he has to offer here. And eventually he trots out this new thing that is really interesting. A figure sprang to life, pirouetting. It was dressed from head to toe and fingertips in what appeared to be glittering, skin-tight netting. What you're looking at is what every armed force in the galaxy would like to get their hands on. The perfected, single-person nerve disruptor shield net, Beta Colony's latest technological card. First I'd heard they were on the market. The open market? No. These are, as it were, private advanced sales. We use nerve disruptors a lot. For security guards, right, sure. I have a limited supply, first come, first served. The price? Miles named a figure in Baton dollars. Outrageous! Miles shrugged. Think about it. It could put your organization at a considerable disadvantage not to be the first to upgrade. I'm sure you can imagine. And he asks if he can have the disc to show his supervisor, and Miles says okay, but just don't get caught with it. The hook was baited and cast upon dark waters. It was going to be very interesting to see what nibbled, whether minnows or monstrous leviathans. So he gets approval from Overholt that he did pretty well, and is trying to just sort of let this cook and not... He's enjoying the ease of this particular mission in comparison to what he had done as Captain Naismith. And just as he's thinking, somebody yells out, Captain Admiral Naismith. And this dude comes up to him, recognizes him. Miles tries to be like, no, it's not me. But it's too late. Cover is blown. And Miles gets blamed for this. And I was sort of like, I don't see how this is his fault at all. But I guess there's just not really another convenient person to blame. So, So anyway, he tells this guy to fuck off, basically. And in an undertone, we can meet later, but not here. Was that smooth? Miles asked plaintively. Overholt looked mildly dismayed. Not very. He frowned down the concourse in the direction the two men had disappeared. So Chodak finally comes to see him. And Miles convinces Overholt to sit outside and let them talk. And remembers this guy's name, which the dude seems really gratified by. And really the situation, it turns out, is that Oser has taken over and is telling everybody that Miles was the con man who tricked them all. And Miles is just like, what? No! I'm trying to find here. Why have you been gone so long? It wasn't my intention. And he says, I was taken prisoner somewhere, which is as close as he can get to the truth of where he had been. I should have heard more, though, from Commander Jessic. Commodore Jessic no longer commands. There was a financial reorganization and restructuring about a year ago. Spearheaded by Admiral Oser, Jessic was demoted to fleet engineer. And Tung? Demoted from chief of staff to personnel officer, a nothing job. That seems wasteful. Oser doesn't trust Tung, and Tung doesn't love Oser either. Oser's been trying to force him out for a year, but he hangs on despite the humiliation of... it's not easy to get rid of him. Oser can't afford yet to decimate his staff, and too many key people are personally loyal to Tung. Miles' eyebrows rose. Including yourself? He got things done. I considered him a superior officer. So did I. Sir, the thing is, the man who was with me in the cafeteria is my senior here, and he's one of Oser's. I can't think of any way, short of killing him, to stop him reporting our encounter. And Miles is like, oh yeah, look, don't worry about that. If he saw me, he saw me. Just don't let him know that we had our chat privately. I think that's the most important thing. And then he says something like, I can deal with Oser, and this is when it's brought up Oser thinks you screwed him. And Miles is like, so Oser, he wound up with like more ships, and there was, he had a smaller slice of a bigger, like, I feel like I left him better than I found him. Um, does Oser feel he hasn't won unless someone else loses? And Chodak says that is probably the exact way to word it. Um, don't let Oser's revisionist history fog your mind. You were there. Take care of yourself. Cover your ass. I'll remember you later. Sir, Chodak nodded. Overholt, waiting in the corridor in a quasi-imperial guardsman pose, escorted him firmly to the shuttle hatch. So Miles thinks about this by himself, and it's just sort of like, what is it? The feeling with him and Oser is very much that Oser is a step away at any moment from seeing through all of Miles's bullshit. But in my opinion, that Oser is coming at it from the wrong direction. It's like he's suspicious of Miles, which he should be, but he is suspicious of him for wrong reasons and suspicious of the wrong failings, I guess is the word I want. Um, I don't know. There's just something, it's like he is in some ways completely correct, but all of the suppositions leading to his correct assumption are, they're just missing like the motivation, the real reason behind what Miles is doing anything, you know? And Miles also thinks about the fact that like he has three dudes in the fleet that are actually personally sworn to him. And what that means in terms of like an obligation, and not just from them to him, but also from him to them. You violated your cover. You never break cover. Sir, may I respectfully submit I didn't blow it. Chodak did. He seemed to realize it, too. He's not stupid. Ungari frowned at the vid plate. It sounds more and more like the Naismith cover may be too dangerous to activate at all. If your Oser's little palace coup is anything like what this fellow indicates, Ilian's fantasy of you simply ordering the Dendari to get lost is straight out the airlock. I thought it sounded too easy. And then, we may still get some use out of Victor Rotha, much as I'd like to confine you to quarters. Strange how many of his superiors said that. Oh, you guys, that cracked me up so bad. Yeah, it's really weird, huh? Oh, God, that's funny. Just, I can't understand why I get that reaction all the time. Um, so he has to meet with Liga again, and they're still trying to figure out like who's behind Liga buying this stuff. Because again, Liga's trying to be like, oh yeah, I have security guards, but then he's talking about how they use nerve disruptors all the time. So Miles is like, okay, well that's a lie. But they aren't sure who he's working for, and that's the thing they're really trying to figure out here. Um, so he goes to speak to Liga, and this woman, the hot blonde, is here. And this whole thing is so weird. So I'm going to put on a voice for her because this is how I imagine. I'm sorry, said Miles automatically. I must be in the wrong place. Not at all. You're right on time. I had an appointment with a Mr. Liga here. Yes, and I've taken over the appointment. Do come in. My name is Livia New. Is it? Is it, Livia? I don't believe you. Are you, Mr. Liga's supervisor? In a sense, yes. But you may think of me as a procurement agent. Do sit down, Victor. And she tells her bodyguard to wait outside. She looked positively seductive. Miles eased cautiously back in the cushions and tried to look seducible. A veritable espionage fantasy encounter of the sort Ngari had told him never happened. Maybe they just never happened to Ngari, eh? My, what sharp teeth you have, miss. Her hand went to her cleavage, a riveting gesture, and withdrew a tiny, familiar vid disc. She leaned over to insert it in the vid player on the low table before them, and it took Miles a moment to shift his attention to the vid. I'll bet it did. This is really remarkable, Victor. How did you come by it? A happy accident. How many can you supply? A strictly limited number, say 50. I'm not a manufacturer. Liga did mention the price. I thought it high. If you can find another supplier who offers these for less, I will be happy to match his price and knock off 10%. So they go back and forth on this a little bit about whether he has sold to governments, which he just tries to be like, well, maybe I did, maybe I didn't. And she asks if he has them with him, and he says that he has never said that, but perhaps could get her one tonight. A size small. One long-nailed finger traced a line down her body from breast to thigh to indicate exactly how small. Miles sighed mournfully. Unfortunately, these were sized for the average to large combat soldier. Cutting one down is a considerable technical challenge, one which I am in fact still working on myself. How thoughtless of the manufacturer. I entirely agree, Citizen New. She looked at him more carefully. Did her smile grow slightly more genuine? So he says something about how they need to make this deal soon because he has to be moving on. And when she asks his next stop, he tells her because they have to have like a publicly shared flight plan anyway. And he asks, can I meet your boss? Who? The man I saw you both with this morning. Oh, so you've already seen him. Set me up a meeting. Let's do serious business. Bait and dollars, remember. Miles, your misogyny is showing. Why are you assuming that she is not the boss? That man is the boss? You don't know that. And your insistence that they can't do business without that man being here. It's sus. Now, I'm not saying that she is in charge. This is very fishy. But I am just saying he keeps insisting that there is somebody else that he should get to talk to. And it's sort of like the way that she responds with, oh, you've already seen him. She's not saying that is her boss. She's just responding to something he has already shared, which is a very like con man move. You use information that's been freely given and act as if that person already knows something. So almost it's their idea, you know? This whole thing is very weird. So he tries to like get out of this and she's like doing the pleasure before business, surely. Was she trying to soften him up? What for? Ungari had said don't break cover. Surely it would be in character for Victor Rotha to take all he could get, plus 10%. You don't have to do this, he managed to choke out. I don't do everything for business reasons. Why indeed should she bother to seduce a sleazy little gun runner? What pleasure was in it for her? What was in it besides pleasure for her? Maybe she likes me. Miles winced, picturing himself offering that explanation to Ungari. So he's like, she's like kind of entwining herself around him and he's starting to get into it a little. And then she squeezes a bit and he freaks like she's going to strangle him and jumps up before realizing the angle that she was at there's no way she was trying to hurt him. Like it just didn't make any sense. But she tries to play it off as a joke and just, I have to go now. He cleared his throat to bring his voice back down to register. Overholt was there at once. Uh, After you've taken delivery, maybe later we could get together? She shook her head in disbelief. Her laugh followed him down the corridor. It had a brittle edge. If she's trying to keep him there, like, I keep thinking about this murder and the fact that it feels like he's being set up. And I don't know how long this body has to be here or how long he has to be here if you are trying to set him up for murder. He got out of there earlier than she seemed to want him to. And it still seems as if everybody believes he committed this murder. So she had a different idea in mind, I think. And it wound up, I don't know, you guys. Like, my initial assessment is, of course, this is all just to frame him. But the framing worked without their plan seeming to go to plan. Like, seeming. So I don't really know what could have been going on here otherwise. Kidnapping? Perhaps? Like, again, though, he's able to just walk up out of there and his guy is right there and not knocked out, laying on the floor. If they were going to take him prisoner, they could have. They don't need to seduce her or for her to seduce him. So is it really that she was just like, you know what? I like the look of you. That feels unlikely. This whole thing felt like too much of a performance. I don't know. I don't know. Anyway, um, so yeah, this is when he gets woken up by Ungari, who's like, the fuck happened in there? And I was like, what do you mean? And he says, Liga's body was found murdered in your meeting room. The security lab has just finished timing it to about when you were to meet. The arrest order will be on the net in minutes and we'll be locked in here. So they have to bail, but understandably, Miles is sort of like, hold on. Are you sure that them framing me isn't them trying to get us to flee? Because that makes us look more guilty. Like, we may be doing exactly what they're asking us to do, or hoping that we will do. Maybe we just sit tight, and I'll be cleared, and that'll fuck their plan up. But Ungari is like, I don't think that's it. I believe that what they're trying to do is lock us up here on the dock. So, no, we're taking off. So then they go to Jackson's Hole, which I have said previously that there has been a feeling of the Batons being the sort of like stand-in for Americans in this story. Like, the Baryarns feel very Russian, especially the types of names they have. The Batons have seemed to be representative of the United States. However, I would argue Jackson's Hole seems a lot more accurate. Jackson's Hole has been referenced a number of times by people who are just like, of course we don't do things that way. That's fucked up and mercenary. We're not Jackson's Hole. Like, that's been said a few times. And Jackson's Hole, first of all, there is a Jackson Hole in the United States, but it's HOLE, and this is WHOLE, which I am still not entirely sure what that change in spelling is meant to signify. I genuinely can't quite come up with a metaphor that really works. But anyway, the capitalism of their economy, and I feel like capitalism isn't adequate. It's hyper capitalism, but like even more than hyper, uber capitalist. Um, this is so incredibly grim. Um, I'm jumping ahead here. I'm sorry. Uh, and I'm so behind. Oh my God, I just realized I'm over time. I've kind of talked about a lot of this already, I guess. So that's okay. Um, but he's got 20 minutes before he is supposed to board. And he's thinking about Livia New and just wondering what the hell it was that she could have been up to. And just that whole thing gets him distracted. And a couple dudes come up and are just like, hey, um, we have a bid for your arrest. Do you wish to outbid? And Miles is like, yeah, probably. How much? And they tell him, it's amazing. Somebody can just buy your arrest and you can just buy it back, which is low key not that far off from how it works. Like, you know, and I know that sounds like incredibly cynical, but unfortunately, that is very much based in fact. And he doesn't have the money. He doesn't have enough. And when he tries to be like, but I'm going to miss my ship, the officer's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what they're trying to make happen. Um, so he gets the shit beat out of him and has these like tasers essentially that really mess with his synapses. And later on, when somebody is like, this is a little dude, why did you go so hard on him? They're like, he had another more impressive guy with him. So they're going to add to his fine as well for resisting arrest. I swear to God. Um, let's see. Uh, he had a big guy with him who gave us trouble. The little mutant seemed to be in charge, so we let him take payment for both. He gets brought to this room and is in leg braces, is left to just sort of like wait out the pain passing. And then all of a sudden, here is Gregor, and Miles is just like, what the fuck are you doing here? And he tells him, I'm not Gregor, I'm Greg Bleakman. Something about that. Mr. Underhill. Um, so they have to like be very careful what they say because obviously they're being monitored almost guaranteed. And the two of them are talking and there is this guy that is just sharing the room and there's a moment where they're talking and this dude just turns over and I'm trying to find the exact line but it's something like he turned with a God save me from these assholes look on his face. And this author really doesn't use swears that often in her books. So just the assholes kind of caught me off guard and was extra funny because of that. Um so Gregor is like, "Yeah, I ran away. Uh I just it was sort of like I was drunk. There was an opening. I had no guard. I don't know what was going on, but there were vines, and I just climbed down, and then I was done, and I was just like, I'll just keep going. And then I got sober and was like, oh, that was a bad plan. And Miles is like, you fucking think? Jesus Christ. And they're in the middle of like a talk with, I think it's the Ceta Gandans when he disappears, which is going to really make it seem like they did something to capture him, which is going to start a whole thing, which is exactly the sort of shit that Ilian was worried about. Like, mm, one mistake. Yeah. Uh so they get this dude to trade IDs. Um and he doesn't want to do it. If whatever you're in for is worse than this, I don't want anything to do with it. Please. Gregor, perfectly placed, pounced. And he chokes this guy out. And later on is like, I think I may have broken his neck. Oh my God. I know their medical care here is much better than ours. So it's possible they could still save him, but breaking his neck that seems pretty grim. So they take shit, clothing, all of this. And Miles is still struggling because the disruptors that they used, it wasn't a regular nerve disruptor. I can't remember what it's called, but he is still suffering from like kind of tremors and sort of spasms from it. Um, Miles made a quick count and multiplication. We can get a quarters to ourselves if we try. And they go into one. This dude starts to follow them, and they're just like, fuck off. And he just backs off really suddenly. And I kind of felt bad for the guy being like, Jesus, what did I do? I thought you were in Aliens department now. I thought you were sent to find me. This isn't some kind of bizarre rescue? No, maybe you'd better begin at the beginning. So he'd been on Komar, under the domes. And I kept thinking about, I think the Stephen King book that's literally called Under the Dome, and was like, did he get that idea from here? And there was a military review. Okay, so these aren't Cetagandans, or I'm trying to make sure. Komarans, because they live under these domes, apparently don't like the open air, but he was feeling claustrophobic. And I already described like his escape and everything. So from IMSEC's point of view, you evaporated from a fully guarded room. No note, no trace, and on Komar. Do you realize what has to be happening back there? It should have been all over the news. And Gregor is like, yeah, they are saying I'm sick, is the extent of it. The full realization of his position was just beginning to sink into Miles like lead in his belly. I'm the only man in the universe who knows where the Emperor of Barriar is right now. If anything happens, I could be his heir. In fact, if anything happens to Gregor, quite a lot of people will think I... And if the Hagen Hub found out who Gregor really was, a free-for-all of epic proportions could follow. Yeah, that's not awesome. He's mine, a prisoner on the run, trailed by God knows what enemies, suicidally depressed, and all mine. Miles choked down a lunatic cackle. And that's the end of the chapter. So I am just going to have to wrap this up because I'm so over time. If I go over like this again, you guys, I'm going to have to like break it off and start the next episode and go a little faster because I can't keep going over onto an hour and 20 minutes every episode. It's eating too much away at me. I can't do it every time. I think probably going forward, breaking these up into smaller sections might be the way to go. As much as I hate that, I think it may be the only way. But yeah, I really am interested in where we're going though. Don't get me wrong, that's part of the problem. All right, guys, thank you again so much. Appreciate y'all being here and listening. And until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.